Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is kind of the post-game podcast. We're going to break down Anthony Edwards' massive performance on Saturday, 44 points against the Houston Rockets, and what to look forward to in Wolves Rockets again Monday night. Why is Houston such a challenge for Minnesota? What else went right for the Wolves? Nate Knight, D'Angelo Russell, opportune defense, all those things happened on Saturday. We're going to break it all down here on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Happy Monday, everybody. Hopefully you had a fantastic weekend. This is, we'll call it a victory Monday with the big win Saturday night. Big win. They beat the worst team in the NBA, but the big Anthony Edwards performance and the win on Saturday night, and then also a game day, Wolves Rockets from Houston this evening. So we're going to break all that down here on the show. I want to talk a ton of Ant here off the top. First, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find Locked On Wolves. You can also download the Roku or Amazon Fire TV, or excuse me, if you have a Roku or Amazon Fire TV, you can download the Locked On Sports Minnesota app for free and watch all Locked On Minnesota shows, including Locked On Wolves, on your Roku or Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at my account, which is at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. All right. So the Wolves beat the Rockets on Saturday, and I get it. The Rockets are the worst team in the league. The Wolves trailed by 2 at halftime. They trailed by as many as 12 in the third quarter. And this, of course, just a couple weeks after they went to Houston, were down 20 points in the first 20 minutes of the game. In the second quarter, they were down 20, ended up kind of blowing the Rockets out the rest of the game. This one was actually a little bit touch and go really until the fourth quarter, midway through the fourth quarter, even really kind of later into the fourth quarter. The Wolves only won by 9. All that's true. It does not take away from Anthony Edwards' fantastic performance. I think there's two very big takeaways from this game, right? Number one is Anthony Edwards, and I want to spend most of my time talking about him here off, this first segment of the show. The second thing is, it wasn't great that the Wolves were down double figures to the worst team in the league in the third quarter after doing the same thing to them a couple weeks ago, losing twice to Detroit. Pick your terrible loss of the year. The Spurs lost early in the season, a couple losses to shorthanded teams. There's been the Timberwolves have had their fair share of these games. So that's also disappointing. It's concerning that the Wolves now also very shorthanded, right? No Rudy Gobert again, still no Karl-Anthony Towns, no McLaughlin, Taurean Prince goes down with the ankle. There's mid-game, there's several things going on here on the injury front. And I think we can acknowledge that. Still, effort level, defensive issues, et cetera, early in the game, just not making shots. Those things were all problems. And we'll talk at the end of the show about what I'm worried about Monday night, why I think the Rockets are such a difficult matchup for the Wolves. So we'll get to that because I have some apprehension about tonight's game and how the Wolves respond to, a mini 2-game winning streak, the emotions of the home win on Saturday with Ant going crazy and everybody talking about his dunks and everything. And then the Wolves feeling like they won somewhat comfortably, but in reality, this thing, they have no business losing to the Rockets in the third quarter. That should not be happening. So I'm a little worried about Monday night. We'll leave it at that for now, but let's focus on Ant because that's where I think we need to spend our time. Anthony Edwards was phenomenal in this game. Both sides of the floor, all three levels offensively, he was really, really good. He got off to a hot start, made the first couple buckets of the game for the Wolves, and then kind of got hot again in the second quarter when this thing was still teetering, right? This was a close game throughout the first half. And really, Ant was the only reason that the Wolves were only down by 2 points at halftime. And I want to get into a couple other team-related things next segment, but I want to open with Ant. So I want to stay there for a minute. But he was the primary reason that the Wolves were actually in this game for most of it, really. He was legitimately dominant in all facets of the game. And it's very rare the Wolves have had a player, Karl-Anthony Towns' two biggest, those really big scoring nights he had, the one against San Antonio year before last, I think at the end of the season, He had one against Phoenix. Ant's had a couple against Phoenix, but like very rarely have we seen a Wolves player, even if it's a high volume scoring night, where it really feels like they've dominated the game in all facets. This was one of those handful of performances in Timberwolves history, in my opinion, where obviously there were several Kevin Garnett games like that, not as much from a scoring perspective, but just dominating both ends of the floor, distributing the ball offensively, defensive, the Garnett defensively just completely would wreck games for opponents. But Ant really was fantastic on the ball defensively. He was fantastic all three levels offensively, mostly made good decisions in terms of passing the ball. Really his only quote unquote bad shots weren't bad shots because he made most of them, right? The shot selection didn't matter as much in this game because he was that hot from the field. This was a legit dominant performance for Anthony Edwards. And I think sometimes we just say that when there's impressive scoring performances by whomever. I'm not just saying Wolves fans, I'm saying NBA fans in general. But Ant dominated defensively too. I mean, he didn't only guard Jalen Green, but like Jalen Green had another bad game. The only single-digit scoring game Jalen Green's had all season was against the Wolves the last time. He only scored 10 points on 13 shots and had 6 turnovers in this game. Ant was a big reason for that. Anthony Edwards was active on the perimeter defensively, hands in passing lanes, moving his feet, was actually, getting down into a stance, ready to defend. And this was, I talked about this with Marnie Gellner on the postcast on Saturday night, which if you're listening on whatever audio platform, the last episode before this was the live postcast with Marnie from Saturday. So go back and check that out. But I talked on that show with Marnie about how his offense feeds his defense, right? If he gets a little bit hot offensively, he wants to do more and more and more on offense. He missed that potential poster dunk. So he said, I got to get another poster dunk. And he did. He got, he ended up with 2 in the game. He missed one. So he needed to get another one to get back at it. It also feeds his defense. He knows like, hey, I can dominate on defense. I can lock in on the ball on defense. I'm going to do that now because I'm dominating so much on offense. And it feeds into itself, right? Offensively, it was unbelievable. 8 made threes in this game. 8 of 16, I believe. Yeah, 8 of 16 outside the arc. So 50% from 3, 17 of 29 from the field. So, I mean, yeah, he was 50% on threes, but he was 9 of 13 on 2-point attempts. So, I mean, what? Like, I don't know, well over 75% from 2-point range. He only had 2 free throw attempts in this game because he shot so many jumpers. He only shot 13 2-pointers. There was a lot of mid-range going on for Ant. I think he had 3 or 4 buckets from the mid-range. So I guess that means he had like 6 in the paint. I don't have the breakdown in front of me, but 5 or 6 makes in the paint. And only 2 free throw attempts. So he probably could have gone to the line a little bit more often than he did. He had 6 rebounds total in the game, 4 assists. He did have the 5 turnovers. A couple were pretty sloppy, but he had the ball in his hands all game long. And so, I'm less fixated on that, given that he scored 44 points on 29 shots while only shooting 2 free throws in this game. But the 4 assists, the 6 rebounds are great. The 2 poster dunks that he had, the 2-handed one against Şengün in the first half, and then the 1-handed one after he missed the 2-handed attempt over Şengün in the second half. He came back down a few possessions later, had the 1-handed hammer. Both times he jumped from the dotted line. So roughly, almost, I don't know, what is that? Like 8 or 10 feet out. Like, just incredible. The 1-handed hammer, both of them were really good dunks. He said after the game in the post-game interview with Katie Storm on Bally Sports North that it was the 1-handed one was his favorite of the 2. He felt like he could have gotten higher in the 2-handed dunk. But just the athleticism, the way that it feels like he's still rising when he gets to the rim. And like, honestly, it's similar to how Michael Jordan dunked, right? It like the famous Michael Jordan free throw line dunk from the dunk contest. It feels like he's still elevating as he reaches the rim. Especially that first Ant dunk, the 2-handed one. That's how I felt. Like that dunk, it felt like he was still going up when he got to the rim. Physically not really possible, but that's what it looked like. And that's what's so different about athletes like Anthony Edwards, right? That quality when they take off, it's not just like, hey, they're jumping and this is a poster dunk. It's they're still going up when they get to the rim. And they punch it through with so much power and so much force. It's different than what you see from so many players. And that's what we saw from Ant. I talked about his 8 made threes. The mid-range game was good. And again, the shot selection, I didn't really have a problem with most of his mid-range jumpers. I mean, he was rhythm dribble into a 2-pointer, a couple fadeaways, but again, not really forced. Like he wasn't pump faking a 3 and driving into a tough long range 2, like we've seen at times in the past with him. These were like legit 12, 14 footers where he was getting himself open, rising above the defense and knocking it down calmly. And he was taking open threes when he had them. He was taking contested threes when he had them, and he was making them 50% of the time. I talked about his defense already. He also had 3 steals and 3 blocks defensively. A couple of those blocks were legit impressive. at least one was on Şengün, if not two. And yeah, he was hunting steals a little bit. We'll talk about this here in a minute. The Wolves were as a team because they knew the Rockets were super loose with the ball. But Ant was really good defensively. 3 blocks, 3 steals, locked down Jalen Green for much of the game. Just a really impressive all-around Anthony Edwards performance. And this is the type of thing that he can do. And nobody's going to do this every night. No one's going to score 44 and make 8 threes and 2 poster dunks and lockdown defense. But if he does this sort of thing every night, maybe in on a smaller scale, right? But if he locks in defensively, shoots a bunch of threes and makes a good number of them and is aggressive going to the rim the rest of the time with the ability to shoot mid-range, like if he just shows this completely perfectly well-rounded game, like there really isn't a weakness. A game like this was practically perfect. And we could talk I could spend a whole podcast talking about the things he should be doing better. Generally speaking, he should finish at the rim better. He should rebound the ball better, all these things. But then you see a game like this where he can do it all. And very rarely do you see a player that has the ability to do it all. So I'm obviously nitpicking when I talk about the things that he needs to improve on. But that's kind of the point, is because when you see this, like what could he be? Like what could this be if he does this most of the time? Because he can do it all. It's not simply like, yeah, like there's certain guys, like you look at, there's plenty of guys, right? Like there's a thing that they might not be super good at and they're probably never going to be good at it, right? Like Jaden McDaniels has been a really good 3-point shooter this year. He's probably not going to be a sharpshooter. I don't know that Anthony Edwards, I guess he's 40% now. McDaniels, that's a bad example because he's been really good from 3 this year. But like there's certain skills that certain guys are never going to have. Like D'Lo's never going to be a lockdown defender. He just doesn't have the athleticism, whatever it is. Ant can be a lockdown defender, right? Naz Reed's probably never going to be a knockdown 3-point shooter. He can shoot threes. He's not going to be 40%. Ant's only 36%, but absolutely he could be a 40% 3-point shooter if he picks his spots, continues to improve his range. Like Ant could literally do anything on a basketball court. And I guess that's the point. Like this game is the perfect example of his ability to do literally anything, which is just so tantalizing. All right. I want to talk about a couple team related things here next that the Wolves did and didn't do well in this game, why the Wolves were in the position they were. We'll do a quick individual studs and duds and then peek ahead and I guess related to all of what we'll get to next. What to expect in Wolves Rockets Monday and why I don't love the Houston matchup for Minnesota. And it's a good thing that they're the Houston Rockets, because there's certain things they do well that match up poorly with what the Wolves really struggle at. So we'll get to that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Prize Picks. On Monday night against the Rockets, I would probably take Alperen Şengün over on rebounds because he tends to rebound the ball really well against the Wolves. I'd probably take Anthony Edwards over on made threes too. It feels like he is, or at least, I don't know if they have attempts. I think they probably have attempts on the two. It feels like he's going to launch a ton of threes after making 8 of 16 on Saturday. But at any rate, there's a lot of fun things you could pick for Prize Picks on Monday night, Wolves Rockets. If you're wondering how Prize Picks works, it's a ton of fun. You just pick 2 to 6 players if they'll score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, and you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's you versus the projections available. And you could also cross sports. So I guess there's not Monday Night Football anymore, but you could pick NBA and NHL if you wanted to, or college basketball and NBA. Cross sports with your picks. And you can, again, win up to 25 times your money. You can make your entry in less than 60 seconds. It really is that easy. Just download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. And if you deposit $100, they'll give you $100. So if you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, a few things that stuck out to me from this game for the Wolves. First of all, let's talk about a couple good things. Nate Knight and D'Angelo Russell came to the party, which was super important because nobody else did besides Ant and Knight and D'Lo, right? Nobody else besides those 3 scored more than 7 points in this game. The only starters that scored more than 5 points were D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards. Kyle Anderson went scoreless. Naz was in foul trouble early and only had 5 points on the night. Jaden McDaniels only scored 5 points in this game, was actually kind of a non-factor. He was good defensively, but non-factor on offense. On the bench, They got 4 from Rivers, 6 from Noel, 7 from Prince, none from Garza. This was all Anthony Edwards. He scored 44 of their 113 points, which quick math would tell you that's more than a third of the Wolves' points in this game were scored by Anthony Edwards. And D'Lo and Nate Knight were the only guys that scored more than 7. Really important they came to the party. We'll talk more about Nate Knight here in a minute. But he was fantastic in this game. He led the team with a plus 23 plus minus. The Wolves really needed him. The supporting cast was otherwise very quiet in this game for the Wolves. Related to that, the Timberwolves 3-headed backup center monster, if you will. We could add a ton of qualifiers to that. Obviously, no Karl-Anthony Towns, no Rudy Gobert. Arguably the two of the 3 best centers in the league, we'll say. Okay, 2 of the best 4 centers in the league, although Towns isn't technically a center anymore, but you know what I mean. Without those 2, you would think the Wolves would be in a really bad way. And they did lose the rebounding battle. They did lose the points of the paint battle, which we'll talk about. But it wasn't Naz Reed in this game. It wasn't Luca Garza. Both of them struggled. Both of them were in foul trouble. They both picked up 3 fouls very quickly in this game. Instead, it was Nate Knight. Nate Knight had his 5 of 9 shooting. He had 8 free throw attempts, 19 points, 3 steals for Knight. He only had 4 rebounds in 25 minutes, which was part of the Wolves' rebounding problem. But it seems like one of those guys is always stepping up. Obviously, Naz has been incredible when on the floor, when not in foul trouble and not injured over the past few weeks, but he's been really, really good. Luca Garza had a couple of really strong games in there. He had 10 points in 9 minutes in about a week ago in a game. He's had a couple other really strong performances. And in this game, it was Knight. He got his opportunity. Naz had the 2 quick fouls early in the game. Then Garza gets into foul trouble. Knight comes in and plays well. Right after halftime, Naz Reed picks up his 3rd foul, heads to the bench. Chris Finch opts to go with Taurean Prince at the 4 and Kyle Anderson at the 5, not even bring in a center. And then Taurean Prince rolls his ankle right around the time the Wolves are making a run, kind of mid-3rd quarter. So then he brings in Nate Knight to play center, and the rest is history, I guess, right? Knight had a fantastic last quarter and a half, and it was just yet another functional NBA center depth at that position for the Wolves. And before the season, I talked a lot about how this was before we knew that Garza was even really going to be in the mix. Remember, he didn't make the team. He was on the summer league team. He didn't initially get one of the Wolves' 2-way deals. And it was I thought the Wolves would trade Naz Reed. That was my prediction. I thought Naz would be traded for a couple of second rounders or whatever that might be. And then you have Knight, and, you could always add another center if you need to, because you have Towns and Gobert. You're staggering them anyway. Naz Reed is an embarrassment of riches. And that was true early in the season. He had a handful of DNP-CDs where Reed just wasn't in the rotation. But of course, then Towns gets injured. Gobert's now injured. So it's very valuable to have a Naz Reed. And adding Luca Garza, as it turns out, was a really smart move by this front office. And I think we should give them credit. I would not have done that, right? I thought the Wolves were set at center, but as it turns out, you can't have enough big bodies, especially when you're kind of focused on playing really big, right? That's kind of what the Wolves are trying to do with Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns. So you need more bigs. And Kyle Anderson is, of course, versatile enough that he could play the 3, the 4, or the 5 very comfortably, and has primarily played the 4 this year, but we saw on Saturday he played some 5 as well. So this 3-headed backup center monster that the Wolves have with Naz and Luca Garza and Nate Knight has been so impressive. And I don't know what this looks like. Gobert may come back as soon as Monday. My guess is they give him another night off, and he doesn't play probably till I think Wednesday is the next game. And Towns is, who knows? I mean, we're at the end of that 4 to 6 week, actually a little past. I think we're 7 weeks now. And initially the diagnosis was 4 to 6 weeks for Towns. He's not practicing yet. We don't know when he's going to be back. It's important that the Wolves have this depth. And I don't know what Towns' actual prognosis is. The team hopefully has a pretty good idea of when he's going to be back, but the trade deadline's in less than 3 weeks, or almost exactly 3 weeks now. Is this team really in a spot where they're going to trade Reed or Knight? I think it's pretty unlikely at this point, because they need as much depth as they can get. These guys have played so well. It's part of the reason the Wolves have stayed afloat and are still at 500, is because of the impressive depth in the front court. So I'd be a little surprised at this point if either Reed or Knight was traded. It's certainly possible, but it would be a bit surprising to me. All right. Rebounding issues once again for Minnesota. In this game, the Timberwolves were where did it go? I had the number. They got out rebounded 56 to 30s. They were a minus 26 on the glass. They give up 15 offensive rebounds to the Houston Rockets. Now, Houston is the best offensive rebounding team in the league. Almost a third. Well, that's not true. Almost 30% of shot attempts that they make, of Houston shot attempts, end in an offensive rebound for Houston. I mean, they're a terrible shooting team. The Wolves have actually played the league's worst two shooting teams now in consecutive games, the Toronto Raptors and the Houston Rockets. But both teams rebound the ball really well on the offensive glass because they know they're a bad shooting team, and their coaching staffs are like, hey, crash the glass. This is how we're going to win games, is activity, getting rebounds, putbacks, etc., kickouts for threes. And Houston tried to do that. It's kind of partly what kept them in the game was the 15 offensive rebounds. But the Wolves, again, rebounding was a big issue. Nobody on the team had more than 7 rebounds. No center had more than 4 rebounds. Garza had 1 rebound in 5 minutes. Reed had 3 rebounds in 15 minutes. Nate Knight had only 4 rebounds in 25 minutes. So the 3 centers combined to grab 8 rebounds. And I guess Anderson played a few minutes at center, but we'll call it like 42 minutes. They had 8 rebounds combined as a 3-headed center. It's not what you want. They have to rebound the ball better than they have been. Ant came to the party a bit, which was great. 6 boards for Ant. I think he was, again, all facets. He was dominant in this game. He was the second leading rebounder behind Kyle Anderson on the team in this game. So rebounding continues to be an issue. It's one of the reasons why Houston's a difficult matchup. We'll talk about that more here in a minute. Free throw margin, it ended up being actually really lopsided in the Rockets' favor. Rockets ended up shooting 33 free throws, but early in this game, at halftime, the Wolves had 16 free throw attempts. Houston only had 8. So that was really, the Wolves were only down 2 at halftime. It's because they out free throwed them by, I think, 6 made free throws in the first half or 7 made free throws. So without those free throws, without that margin, this is much closer to a double-digit deficit at halftime. The Wolves were aggressive going to the basket. Now that changed a little in the second half. The Wolves shot a lot more threes in the second half, and Houston got the bonus quickly, but they also couldn't make their free throws. They were 19 of 33. Houston shot under 58% from the line. Alperen Şengün was good. He was easily the Rockets' best player. It wasn't close, but he was just 4 of 10 at the free throw line. So that was, I don't know, that's notable in this game. The free throw attempts in the first half kept the Wolves in it. In the second half, it actually helped allow Houston to hang around. It was the Wolves' inability to defend without fouling at times, which was a major issue. Transition, another problem for the Wolves in this game, because early in the game, they forced at halftime, I think the Rockets were in double figures in turnovers. They finished with 21. The fast break points ended up in the Wolves' favor. So if you look at the box score at the end of the game, or you look at the team stats at the end of the game, the Wolves won fast break points pretty easily. But at halftime, the ratio was awful. Like they had like 7 points off like 11 or 12 turnovers by Houston at halftime. That's ballpark numbers, but it was around that, which is really bad. Like the transition offense, again, the secondary break actions for Minnesota, not good. And that's been a consistent theme this year. Like every couple of games, there's just a stinker like this where they can't figure out how to score in transition. And it's come back to bite them in some closer games against good teams. That's something to keep an eye on as we go through the season. And again, they improved as the game went on, which is super important. But anyway, that's something to keep an eye on. The turnover battle, they won 21-11, meaning Houston had 21 turnovers. The Wolves only had 11. And this is yet another game. The Wolves have been much better lately, taking care of the ball themselves offensively. But that was a huge thing in this game. They still only won by 9, despite the plus 10 of the turnover battle. But Houston was so sloppy with the ball. So sloppy. And that was a huge thing in the Wolves' advantage. All right. Or to the Wolves' advantage, I should say. All right. Let's close here by doing individual studs and duds. And then we will I also want to do a couple things like related to what we just talked about, related to the Wolves-Rockets matchup on Monday night, what to look out for there. So we're going to do that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our new friends at FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are here. We're super excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. If you're a new customer, join today to get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. NFL weekend, ton of fun to bet over at FanDuel. There were a lot of good matchups. I think I took the Bengals and the points on Sunday. Of course, championship weekend, this coming weekend, tons of NBA action during the week. It's all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, quickly, individual studs and duds from Wolves Rockets on Saturday. Obviously, Anthony Edwards is a stud. We already talked about his line, but 44, 6, and 4, plus 3 steals, 3 blocks, 50% from 3, well over 50% from the floor. Fantastic game for Anthony Edwards. Good defensively. D'Angelo Russell, haven't talked much about him, but he was really big, especially late in this game as the Wolves were trying to put the Rockets away and really kind of just held them at arm's length. D'Lo had 23 points on 11 shots. That's about as efficient as you're going to get, especially for D'Lo. I mean, that's more than 2 points a shot attempt, which is phenomenal. 6 of 11, so better than 50% from the floor. 4 of 6 outside the arc as D'Lo continues his progression to the mean. I'm talking about this all season related to the Wolves in general, but D'Lo is a perfect example. He was shooting like 33, 34% from 3. He's gotten hot lately. He's now almost 38% from 3, 37.8% from 3-point range this season for D'Lo. And again, that hot streak lately is what's gotten him there. Also a perfect 7 of 7 at the line. Any game where D'Lo gets the line 7 times, the Wolves are going to have a really good chance of winning. He also had 8 assists to only 2 turnovers. So 23 and 8 for D'Lo on greater than 50% from the floor, 4 made threes, and a perfect 7 of 7 at the line. He was really, really good. And obviously Nate Knight, we talked about him, 19 points, 4 rebounds, 3 steals, 5 of 9 shooting, 7 of 8 from the line, 2 of 3 outside the arc. And what our friend Marnie Gellner likes to say is that you never, I think she says he plays loud minutes. Knight does. Like, you never are questioning whether or not Nate Knight played in a game, because when he's on the floor, he's taking the ball to the basket. He's grabbing rebounds. He's being physical. He's committing fouls. He's doing something, right? He did commit 4 fouls in 25 minutes in this game because he's so active and plays with force that, like you don't question whether or not Nate Knight played. I said this earlier. He had the Wolves' best plus minus mark in this game, a plus 23. For what it's worth, Ant was only a plus 14. But those are the 2 best marks on the Wolves, of course, in this game, a game they won by 9. No, I guess the only dud for me in this game is Naz Reed, because he got into that early foul trouble, put the Wolves kind of behind the 8 ball early. He was 2 of 7 shooting, missed all 4 of his 3-point attempts, only 3 rebounds in 15 minutes, and committed those 3 fouls. So not a great game for Naz. And again, for what it's worth, he was actually the only Timberwolves player with a negative plus minus in this game. It was a -9. Nobody else was worse than even in this game for Minnesota. So not a great Naz game. Would expect him to bounce back, though, on Monday in Houston. All right. A couple of things to look out for on Monday night. I talked about this a little bit ago, but the offensive rebounding thing is scary. I mean, the Wolves are still, they're now 28th in defensive rebound percentage. They've gotten crushed on the glass by Toronto and by Houston over the past couple. Even though they've been wins, they've gotten crushed on the glass. They've gotten beat in points in the paint. No Rudy Gobert is a huge reason for that. And obviously, go even further, no Karl-Anthony Towns. That's a big problem, right? So it's going to be a challenge. However, a team like Houston, that's like their only saving grace, right? They're a terrible offensive team. They're a terrible shooting team. They're relying on these second chance opportunities. They're relying on offensive rebounds in order to score. They're number 1 in offensive rebound rate. 29.5% of their available offensive rebounds are gobbled up by the Rockets. Almost 1 in 3 of their missed shots ends up back in their hands. They're 29th in 29th in 3-point percentage, 30th in field goal percentage. That means they're 28th in effective field goal percentage league-wide, but number 1 in offensive rebound rate, and they're 12th in free throw rate. They attempted, 33, I think? Yeah, 33 free throws against the Wolves on Saturday. They only made 19. They shot 57.6% from the charity stripe. But the problem is the 15 offensive rebounds and the 33 free throw attempts. That is how teams hang around, and the Wolves foul a lot. And they're a bad defensive rebounding team. It's a bad combination. Thankfully, the Rockets are a terrible shooting team. And that's it. And also being so sloppy with the ball. And I talked about this earlier, but yikes. I mean, the Rockets are the worst team in the league in terms of turnover rate. They turn the ball over more than any team in the league. 14.5% of their possessions end in a turnover. That's coming up in close to 1 in every 5 possessions, which is really bad. The Wolves are still pretty good at turning teams over. They're not quite what they were last year, but that's important. The Wolves need to, it's okay to hunt steals against a team like the Rockets, because if you gamble and miss, they're probably not going to make the shot anyway. And it's a bad habit, certainly. You don't want to do that later this week when the Wolves take on, Memphis and Sacramento and teams like that. But against Houston, you can get away with it. And if the Wolves struggle from the field like they did early in the Rockets game Saturday, if they struggle on the defensive glass again, hey, you got to hunt some of those steals. You got to get some easy transition points. That's important for the Wolves to beat the Rockets. Now, Houston hasn't won very much at all this year, period, but especially recently, they've lost, I forget how many, but 7 in a row or 6 or 7 in a row, and 16 of 17 or something crazy. The Wolves have no business losing this game Monday night, but I'm still a little nervous about it because of the track record of the Wolves losing to bad teams, Detroit twice, the Spurs, etc., being down double digits to the Rockets in both games against Houston, and also the emotional high of the win Saturday, the home game, Ants 44, the poster dunks, just the crowd getting into it, like the whole thing. It's one of those few kind of high moments the Wolves have had this year. How will they respond on the road against a terrible team on Monday night? What's that going to look like? I'm a little worried about it, if I'm being honest. So we'll, of course, do the live postcast with Marnie Gellner of Bally Sports North about 45 minutes after the game Monday night. So be sure to tune in for that on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel. So subscribe to that channel to be notified when we go live. Again, it's a 7 p.m. tip, I believe. So we'll probably go live a little after 10, 15, whenever the game ends. At about 45 minutes or so onto that, we'll go live after Marnie's done with the post-game show on Bally Sports North. And then we also post the audio to the Locked On Wolves audio feed. So go ahead and listen to that on wherever you listen to podcasts if you can't catch it live on Locked On Sports Minnesota. So we'll do that. And then, of course, Tuesday's show will be the post-game podcast. We'll talk all about Tuesday night's Wolves-Rockets game. That will be the focus, I should say. And then moving forward, the rest of this week gets really tough schedule-wise for the Wolves. So we'll also talk about that as the week goes on. A big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. It's absolutely greatly appreciated. Of course, it's free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also go to Locked On Sports Minnesota on Roku or Amazon Fire TV and check out all the Locked On Minnesota podcasts. You can follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Now make your second listen the Game-to-Game NBA podcast. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.